I'm selling my favorite lens. It's been 2 years of plenty of weddings, plenty of photo shoots, plenty of engagement shoots, going out with family, friends, just everything. It's been used so many times on this channel, and I think it's time to move on. The lens that I'm talking about is a Sony full frame 35mm f1.8. I think it's one of the cheapest prime lenses that Sony make, apart from the 50mm f1.8, for their full frame camera range. So why am I selling it? And more importantly, what am I replacing it with? Well, I've bought a Sony 35mm prime, but this time, the G Master f1.4. Between these two lenses, brand new, there's easily £600 plus in terms of price. I think you can actually get two of these for the price of one of these. So what the f am I thinking? So what's the difference between the 1.8 and the 1.4? Apart from this one having the red G Master logo and costing a lot more. Now obviously the G Master goes to f1.4 and this one goes to f1.8. Now I'm not the guy who shoots wide open all the time no matter what. Sometimes it's nice, but I also like to have more than just the pupils in focus. But over the last 5 or 6 weeks of owning the f1.4, f1.4 has become really beneficial to me. The reason I chose to go for the f1.4, or to at least try the f1.4, is because I do a lot of wedding photography, and a lot of the weddings here in the UK are indoors. And unfortunately, when you're shooting indoors, sometimes the light available to you isn't great, and yes, you can use flashes, but sometimes flashes just don't also work well for the kind of situation you're in. And the difference between shooting f1.8 on this and f1.4 is the difference between shooting at 5000 ISO on this and only 3200 ISO on this. Sure, mirrorless cameras today are much better at dealing at high ISOs and minimizing the amount of noise in the image. But you can't deny if push comes to shove and you have the opportunity to shoot your subject in natural light at a much lower ISO, then obviously you would. But obviously there's more benefits to this lens than just the wider aperture. First off, it's got a larger filter thread diameter. It's not quite a make or break thing, but it does mean that the filters that I've got for my 85mm f1.8 does fit on my new 35mm f1.4. And if I have to use an 82mm filter, then it doesn't quite look as obscene as it would do if I put it on this lens. It's also got a declickable aperture ring which you can control from the barrel of the lens. It's not really a feature that I'm a massive user of, but it can be used for if you're doing a lot of video work and you want to smoothly change the exposure of your shot just by using the aperture. The f1.4 also has 2 extra aperture blades, meaning that the bokeh in the background, when blurred out, will be much smoother than what it would be on the f1.8. But all the talk about bokeh and the creaminess of the background is just down to personal taste, and it differs depending on what kind of lens and focal length you shoot on. And this is made from a magnesium alloy, very similar to what the Sony cameras are made from, and this is made from aluminium and plastic. But with all the good things about this lens, there are some bad things about it. Firstly, the weight. The weight of this lens is almost twice the amount of what this is. This is also larger in terms of diameter and also length. And one of the biggest things that actually shocked me for a lens which is so expensive is the focus breathing. The amount of focus breathing that this lens has, to say how expensive it is quite tremendous, whereas this one, it's kept to a bare minimum. Admittedly, if you're wanting to use the lens for primarily photography purposes, then the focus breathing isn't going to be an issue. But if you're wanting to use this lens for mainly video purposes and you're going to be pulling focus from very close to the lens to very far away quite a lot, then it will quickly become a deciding factor for you. Especially if the camera that you're using doesn't have the focus breathing compensation built in, like some of the newer Sony cameras are now having. But regardless, when you're using that, you get a small crop in the image, so 35mm isn't a true 35mm in them situations. But in terms of focusing speeds between these two lenses, they are pretty much comparable. But something to remember is that the focusing isn't just down to the lenses, it's also down to the camera body, because that obviously determines what the focus point should be. But regardless, with both of these on my Sony a7S III, they are absolutely solid. And whilst we're on the topic of videos, you may have seen a few of these dotting around here and there. Well, these are all courtesy of motion VFX. If you're a video creator like me, you'll know how important it is to have a reliable source of motion graphic assets. And not only that, but having some which are fully customizable and easy to drag and drop. And that is where Motion VFX comes in. Motion VFX are a leading provider of motion design resources, offering a vast library of professionally designed assets and plugins, which are compatible for Premiere Pro, Final Cut, and even DaVinci Resolve. All of their plugins and templates are designed by industry professionals, meaning that you can trust that these products are of the highest quality and will help you create stunning visuals to impress your clients and your audience. But one of the biggest things about Motion VFX is how easy it is to use their products. With a simple drag and drop, it takes all the pressure from you needing to learn how to do motion design and allows you to create the rest of the video. So if you want to check out Motion VFX and save 10% off your first order, then hit the link below and enter Danny10 at checkout. So back to the lenses. It's all good talking about the specs and the figures, but how do they actually compare visually? One of the first things I noticed between these two lenses is the difference in vignetting. And unfortunately on the G Master, there's a lot of it. At f1.4, there's a lot of vignetting in the corners. There's a little bit less when you get to f1.8. And when you get to around f2, I would say they're around about the same in terms of the amount of vignetting shown. Also, just a quick note, the reason that f1.4 seems a little bit tighter visually than the 1.8 is because the camera didn't move, it was on a tripod. And obviously the front element of the 1.4 is closer to the subject than it would be on the 1.8. Also, I wouldn't say that the image from one lens is more warped than the other, and regardless, both of them could be corrected quite easily, and the chromatic aberration between the two is fairly similar. But ultimately, it's all down to personal taste and preference. Lenses are a little bit like spices. Some spices just suit a particular person's palette than another spice. And if I'm being brutally honest, if I didn't do as much wedding photography as what I do now, and wanted to benefit myself as much as possible in them tricky lighting situations, I probably wouldn't have bought this. I'd have probably stuck with the 35mm f1.8. It's small, it's lightweight, and it delivers incredible image quality, especially when you consider the price that it is. So perhaps I actually haven't made the right decision in this situation, or maybe I have. Who knows? I may live to regret this, but if you enjoyed the video, then hit the like button. If you want to see more like this, then hit the subscribe button. And if you do, I'll see you right there. I'll see you soon. Laters.